Good? Excellent. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I love coming to the Netherlands. I've been many, many times. I even have family members here, so it's great to live in Rotterdam. So this is about myself. I'm calling this Identity is the New Money because there's a really beautiful book that's from David Birch that I really recommend you to read, which is called Identity is the New Money. And basically, identity combines two other things that I'm really interested in, that I've been working on for many years. One is money, second one is blockchain, and the third one is identity. So the thesis of everything I'll be talking about will be a little bit about that. We've coordinated a little bit with Paco, because we are both Spanish, which is a coincidence. You have two Spanish guys coming today here for you. So I'll do more the high level aspirational view of where I think identity will be going to, and Paco will do like more of a deep dive of a concrete use case. My background is a little bit mixed. I'm kind of Spanish, German, Moroccan, but I lived most of my life in Spain. So if you hear my German accent, it's because I went to the German school in Malaga. That's where I'm from. So before we go into identity, some things I like to share, because Rogers, he was saying it before, and I think, yes, the last 2 years we had like a big hype around blockchain. And this year is I think, it's much, much better. I do a lot of meetups, and we just did one 2 days ago where 90 people popped up out of the blue for smart contracts, very basic. And what I'm really seeing is that the quality of people is increasing a lot, and all the people that were just interested in making a quick buck, that's really disappearing. But independently of blockchain, I think we have a number of challenges that are really changing our society really quick. One is technology, all the exponential technologies, and blockchain is one of them. And the regulatory pressure is really increasing for everyone, so that makes everyday business more complicated. I mean, you have very advanced countries, maybe like the Netherlands, where things work maybe easier or better, but in countries like Spain, where I come from, it gets really, really complicated, all the stuff you have to deal with from a regulatory point of view. Digital natives, the demand is basically all the people spending all the time online. They're very demanding, and they change really quick, and that's basically all of you. And then you have all the new tech. New tech is like all those new companies trying to eat up the traditional businesses, and that's really reshaping the value chain. And from my point of view, that really creates a situation, and Rogers, who was mentioning that too right now, is that everyone becomes everyone else's competitor, because everything is shaping up and changing so quick that we don't really know where we're going. Finally, monetary policy, I think it's a key thing, and it's one of the things I'll be talking about a little bit at the end when I talk about money too. But monetary policy, the way it has been done, at least in the European Union for the last 10 years, with super low interest rates, it's going, will be going up again, but that has been also making life difficult for, if you talk about banks, insurances, anyone who's dealing with money, it has created a very difficult environment. But when we talk about identity, most of the time, and I have only 15 minutes, usually I like to make it more interactive, but most of the time when you talk with people about identity, they say, oh, identity, yeah, that's my passport, or my driving license, whatever, that's my identity. And people identify with identity basically what they see as their bureaucratic identity. But when we think about it, identity in the bureaucratic sense, like until 100 years ago, didn't really exist. When we had to travel in Europe or the world, there were no borders. Maybe it was dangerous, but you didn't need a passport to travel around. And basically, for diplomatic, geopolitical reasons, they started creating these passports, and that's where this kind of bureaucratic identity came from. What we will be talking a little bit more about when we combine blockchain, identity, and money is about what it means in a broader sense, and that identity is much, much more, and it's everything I do in my everyday life. And since it's everything I do in my everyday life, we also need to protect that. Yeah, so that's paper, but I'm just not sure if this moves. Okay, but the problem we have is that this really worked for the 20th century, but for the 21st century, since the world is digitalizing, and you have some really nice books, I was reading this a little bit, which I really recommend you to read, that's what I think is part of the future, and you're really fortunate to be in a country like the Netherlands, where you kind of have this collective vision of what that means. But for the digital world, if we want to have something like a passport that is really issued by the government or any other type of credential, which is basically just saying you can do this, you have the right to do this, and this institution or person is saying that, we need something that is equivalent to that, but in a digital format. And that's not really existing today. And we were talking about it right now. If we depend on the Facebooks, Googles, or anyone, and I don't want to blame those companies, because if they have the opportunity, of course they have to take it up. But we as a society, we need to create systems for all of us where we can protect our privacy and use those things in a decentralized way. And that's what I see blockchain and decentralization is all about. In our company, Evernym, we've been thinking about this stuff for 6 years. I joined 2 years ago. I've been in blockchain like for 5 years, but 2 years ago I started getting really, really interested in identity. And that's when I started working with Evernym. And Evernym had this vision to create decentralized digital identity. So one of the first things they thought is, okay, all this technology we developed, let's create a foundation where all this technology will be donated to. And that's the Sovereign Foundation. And later on, the Sovereign Foundation contributed the code base to Hyperledger Indy. I'm just telling you this a little bit so you know the background, because this is one of the high-profile projects in the identity space, I believe. I'm not saying it because I work with them. And this is basically the evolution. And it's not called Hyperledger Sovereign because for intellectual property reasons, they didn't want it to call it Hyperledger Sovereign. So Indy stands for independent. And it's one of the reference projects of Hyperledger. And what we do is basically we take all those credentials, like passport credentials or any other type of credential that you can have, and put it on top of a decentralized system that allows you to share who you are and what you do in a very selective way that is privacy protecting, where you use zero-knowledge proofs and other types of exotic cryptography, basically to allow you to do that. Okay, and the vision a little bit about this is that at the same, and I really love the beginning of the video where it said, Bitcoin is part of the future. Where I come from in Spain, when you talk in a public space of the government, if you say Bitcoin, they start throwing tomatoes at you. So it was really nice to see that you have this open mind to consider all alternatives, because I think that's really important. But in the same way that we see Bitcoin as a potential way of having a decentralized type of money, Ethereum as a decentralized application way, the vision is that sovereign or other solutions, I think this is a really open way about how we approach it from Evernym, is that we will have a future SSI protocol, that's how we call it, or open SSI world, where we have the internet of identity. And you will have many different systems fulfilling the needs of many different use cases or different people for what they want to achieve. Part of the companies that have been working this, that's by accident a little bit, but also that has been one of the big successes of Sovereign and Evernym, is that we have many big corporate players that have been collaborating on this. So you have some logos here. And Stefan, he told me when I came, he said, don't talk about blockchain because these guys, they know everything about blockchain. So I won't talk much about blockchain, but I'd just like to share this vision because it is what will lead to the next slide. So when we take the blockchain stack, we have like the infrastructure level, and then on top of that we have all the other levels you can have. This is basically, it all started with Bitcoin at the beginning. It has really evolved into this broader space where where the vision of these people was to create a decentralized economy. And the things that has been feeding this vision of a decentralized economy has been very different to the way it has been done in the DLT world. And to expose it is basically the people of this space, they usually want to see a decentralized economy that is creating this disruption in the same way it's being done in the Silicon Valley style. The type of money where it has been coming from has been mainly coming from speculation, because you had hardcore fanatics that believed very much in Bitcoin and never sold them, and those values went up a lot over time. And very often these people were people working, at least in the Spanish case or the South American case, which is where I mostly work, is people working from 9 to 6 at a company that hated their job and at night they would work at open source projects and to create a decentralized world because they were not satisfied, or they're not satisfied with how the world works today. And they invested that money into creating this kind of ecosystem. And that's what I call the public blockchain space. Okay. And then we have another world, which is the DLT world. And the DLT world, as you know, is basically coming from corporates, usually with employees from corporates, and also the money is coming from the corporates too. And these two worlds have been in conflict a lot, I think, over the last couple of years, but they're getting closer because the geeks and the nerds from the left side, from the public blockchain space, they see, okay, this is really nice that I'm doing all my nerdy stuff, but I need to have the normal people getting on this too. And the people on the right say, yeah, I need to have the geeks and nerds too, because they're doing a lot of the interesting open source stuff. So these two worlds are coming slowly together, and we will see, from my point of view, how that shapes out. And this is just how this all works out. Like if you take something like Evernym Sovereign, it's really on the top right, where it's a permissioned network that has public access. And Bitcoin is like the pure permissionless. And there are many, many different approaches to how this works in identity too. And this is a little bit, and I like to share this slide about how I personally see that. And because a lot of people, from my point of view, and I've struggled myself a lot with that, is don't recognize that a lot of the things about the choices we do about technology are a representation of our view of the world. So if you're a DLT believer, that's how I call them, usually you trust the government, you trust institutions, you trust the whole establishment of how it works today. And that's okay, there's no problem with that. But if you have that vision of the world, then you will trust a DLT solution. You will say, I don't have a problem with the permission system. I don't have a problem with that and that and that, because it all works well. And if you live in a country like the Netherlands, for the time being at least, probably that's okay. But if you live in Venezuela, I'm not so sure. So it really depends on the circumstances and where you are. And on the other end, you have the people that say, no, I don't trust centralized institutions. I want to decentralize the world, because if we decentralize power over information in the same way we're talking about it like for the Facebooks and Googles of the world, that will create a better world potentially, because if institutions don't have the power anymore over that information anymore, we can create a new world that is more fair. Potentially. It also has the risk of becoming potentially much more dangerous from my point of view. So there's a whole spectrum of that. I think the most decentralized solution we have today is Bitcoin. That's on the cutting edge there, and it has been getting more centralized over time. And the reality of things is that creating decentralized solutions is incredibly difficult. And there are many levels of decentralization. So you cannot only say, oh, this is decentralized. No, on what level is it decentralized? Is it ideologically decentralized, politically decentralized, technologically decentralized, logically decentralized? There are many, many different aspects about that, what that means. So you have all kind of grace in the middle here. And that's the really important question, I think, when we think about decentralization, is about to see, okay, where's decentralization really happening? Because the most decentralized system we have today is Bitcoin, and everything else in reality is below that. And it's not as decentralized. So, and since this becomes an ideological world very often, where you have these guys saying you're wrong and these guys saying you are wrong, I don't think anyone is really wrong. It just really depends on your vision of the world. And your vision of the world, whatever it is okay and it's right. But to establish this kind of communication and dialogue, I think it's important just to take this into consideration. And this basically is happening in the identity world too. In the identity world, we have all those flavors of identity where we'll have people say, oh, I have perfect decentralized identity. I think in most cases that's not really true today, because it's incredibly difficult to achieve that. But yes, the vision of what we want to achieve is to get there at some point in the future, and we'll see which technologies work for you, which use cases. And now about money. Usually I love to ask questions about what people think about money, but I don't know how well I'm doing on time. I'm 8 minutes, nice. Good, and so then I would love to ask you 2 questions about money, because I'll love to hear the answers. When we think about money, I think it's very important. I love to talk about it, because I think our societies, they tend to put money like in a pedestal and like very high, almost as if it were a god. And I don't believe it's a god. The more you study monetary policy and how money works and where it's coming from, I think it's just a tool for society to communicate with each other and transact. And that's the basics. But if you my question for you is that when you think about money, why do you think when you go out in the shop outside here in The Hague, why do people accept your euros? Anyone has any idea or any suggestion why that works? Trust, I heard, right? Yeah, okay, what else do you think? Okay. Okay, what else do you think? Okay, they trust the government too, yeah? Anyone else who has a suggestion? Exactly.
Alex, can I ask you to throw the mic to the people that have questions in the room, so the live stream people can hear it as well?
Okay, I think we went through all the questions already, but sorry for not remembering to share the mic well. Anyway, these are the basic characteristics of money. You see them all there, that's the 7 of them. And those characteristics, you said one of them already, convert in functions. So basically, money needs to be a store of value, needs to be a medium of exchange, and also needs to be a unit of account. But everything starts really by being a store of value, because if you have something that is store of value, that's good for you, because they say, okay, I can hold this for some time and I will be able to spend it in the future. Basically, you're avoiding current spending and you're saving that for the future. But to do that, you need something that will keep its value over time. Those are just the basics of money, just for at least from my point of view, to share that quickly, because usually this discussion takes some more time. I think two of the key questions about why our money, why we trust our money when we go to the shop, there are a number of reasons for that. Because it represents the Eurozone economy, because the central banks kind of with the monetary policy make sure that it kind of keeps its value over time and stuff like that. But the two key instruments about how the governments achieve, or the central banks achieve, that from my point of view, that money can work as a tool, is the two tools. One is because it's legal tender. They make it the unique money. There's a monopoly on money. When you go out to the shop, you cannot go out and say, oh, I want to pay with dollars, or I want to pay with, I don't know, with Argentinian pesos. No, you will have to pay with euros. Why? Because that's the legal tender. So that creates a demand for that type of money. And the second reason is also because you have to pay your taxes with that. Because the legal tender, when the tax authority of the Netherlands comes to you, you cannot go say, oh, you know what, I made millions with my bitcoins, I'm gonna pay you with bitcoins. No, they will say, no, you're first gonna sell some of your bitcoins, and then you'd come with me and pay with euros, because that's the legal tender. And all those instruments, they start creating a wheel of demand for that type of money. And since there's no competition for any other type of money, that's basically the reference money. That's, from my point of view, how they create those tools. The way how this is related, and David Birch, from my point of view, really describes this really well, is when you think about society, in our complex societies, we need these tools of money the way we have it. But if you imagine like the hunter-gatherers times, like a long time ago, they don't need money, because basically if you know everyone in your super small village of 30 people, you don't need money. You have an accounting system about how you interact with all each other, and you know each other. And that's how this is related from my point of view to identity. Because basically when you know the people, you know the identity. You know he's related to this person, he usually doesn't, I invite him every Friday to lunch, he never invites me back to lunch. In my internal mental accounting, he's in debt with me, so I'm not inviting you anymore. You're like your bad payers. So in small system, that kind of works. And what is happening with identity, and that's from my point of view what could be happening in the future, because since crypto or cryptocurrencies kind of fulfill all the characteristics of money, and we're unifying the identity world together with the crypto world over time, we might end up having a representation of the hunter-gatherer times the way we had it thousands of years ago in a digital society. So that's one of the hypotheses for the future. And from my point of view, the reason why we can do that is because, at least where I'm coming from, which is a very conservative country, I like to think about it that way. This is the universe represented since the Big Bang in 12 months. And when you see since the Big Bang until today, basically in those 12 months, like 1 second ago, Christopher Columbus did get to America. And this is something you can see in Cosmos on Netflix. They have a very beautiful series where they explain a lot of things about science. And what I'm suggesting with that is that what the opportunity we have with blockchain and all exponential technologies is basically to reshape the world the way we know it. Because basically we can reinvent everything. Our lives are so short that we don't realize that everything we use today has been created at some point in the future just because technology evolved. And what is happening right now is everything is changing so quick that the world as we know it is changing dramatically. Give me 2 more minutes. That's why I think that we have a network world of 7 billion people, which is part of this decentralized economy, and identity is one of the fundamental aspects to make all that happen. And we will see how that shapes up over time. If you want to read about decentralization, I really recommend you to read these books. These are very beautiful books, but I especially love this one from many, which is from the founder of Visa, who explains how decentralized systems work. He published this in the year 2000. I'm one of the founders of Blockchain España, which is one of the main communities in Spain about blockchain, and we do a lot of articles, meetups, and all kind of different stuff. I'm also one of the founders, together with Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Panama, Mexico, and Spain, of the Ibero-American Blockchain Alliance, where we try to push the same things. 4 years ago, I published Bitcoin, The Hunt for Satoshi Nakamoto, which is kind of the first graphic novel about Bitcoin, which has been published to Russian, Korean, Brazilian, and some other languages, English too, not in Dutch yet, and also published this book about blockchain, which is kind of the reference book about blockchain in the Spanish-speaking world. In identity, if anyone here is involved in identity, I recommend you checking out SSI Meetup, which is something that we do in English to create a global SSI community. If anyone is interested in joining or talking one day, please get in touch with me. Also writing a book about decentralized digital identity that will be published by the end of this year by many people in the identity space. If you're interested in that, please reach out to me too. And I hope I fulfilled the time. And thank you very much for your attention.